Hello everyone, Graydon Marshall here for the serial killer midterm. So the first question is, how does misinformation in the media impact a few aspects surrounding a murder? So the first one I'm going to be talking about is a case. I think, and this is definitely like recent years, I've seen a lot of it, is these like social media detectives. And I remember there being one case that was pretty big. I can't remember what it was, but basically they were like following the leads that they saw come out in the media, or trying to like follow their own leads from the information that was out, and they ended up basically hindering the police department's ability to do their job, and even sometimes like finding a lead that the police didn't even have yet, and then so we're just crossing lines, and it definitely was not good for their investigation. And then another thing I could see potentially is like public safety. So like giving the media giving like a bad description, or saying an area is safe, or this or that, could definitely influence like someone to feel like they're safe or they shouldn't be on edge, and then they could potentially become another victim. I don't feel like that happening a lot, but it's just something that could happen. So moving on to how misinformation could impact a victim. So I drew from the article about Rita Isabel, who is the sister of one of Jeffrey Dahmer's victims. And so they made the documentary on Netflix about Jeffrey Dahmer, and they basically did a piece in it about Rita Isabel's victim statement, or impact statement, in the Netflix documentary. Like, didn't ask her, like she was just like, what the heck, and she just watched it, and she basically talks about how it impacted her. And then she also talked about like the media during the time of the actual trial going on, and how that impacted her. So one of the things she mentioned, or it was basically someone interviewing her, but it wasn't her writing it. So one of the things they mentioned, she said, was like right after she gave her impact statement, she was like rushed with media, like leaving the courtroom. And like obviously that's not a good thing to be doing to a person whose sister was just murdered. Um, so another thing she talked about is they didn't like ask the families or anything, if they could, you know, use interpret or basically like show their dead family members in the film and stuff like that. They didn't like go to the families with any sort of like monetary value for using their dead family members in it or anything. So she just felt like it was a huge cash cow for Netflix, and they didn't really ask anybody, and they didn't care about any of the victims or their families. They just did it for money. And so like that's totally a huge thing, how media can impact victims and their families, just not caring and just caring about money. The second thing, which I remember reading about this that week, which is pretty crazy to me, is the murderability. I can't even say that word. So I think this definitely goes to like society's understanding, and how that influences it. Um, so this is from the News 3 article, basically quoting somebody saying, you shouldn't be able to rob, rape, and murder and then turn around and make a buck off of it. And then, so yeah, that's just crazy. So just to, like, imagine being the victim's family and having your relative's tragedy extorted for money. Like, that's pretty crazy. And it's not just like other people selling, this murderabilia. It could be the murderers themselves. Like, I remember watching the John Wayne Gacy documentary last week, and he literally like made paintings in prison and sold them for like a hefty price, like $200 or $300, which isn't actually like things that he used to murder people. It's just him making them, and so it's still not good. Um, and the other thing, and this kind of intertwines the two, is that serial killer documentaries actually influences the sales of murderabilia. So I found that pretty interesting. So a specific murder's memorabilia sales might increase because of a certain documentary, or maybe like there's like new findings or something in the news or something like that, or developments. So the next question we're going to be talking about, so the one I chose for question 2 was, are all serial killers white men? So the answer is no, but mostly. So from the article Homicide Detectives Tape, Chief Nelson, he's from the West Miami Police Department. So in his article, it says that serial killers tend to be white and between 20 and 40 years old. So there you get it. Most of them do seem to be in that age range. And then I took a look at, going back to week 3's PowerPoint, Dr. M. Goodman, 2008, 16, and this kind of goes to more of the racial side of things. And it's very interesting how there were a few different studies pointed out there, and they're all basically showing different statistics. So it seems like maybe they're from different subject pools. I'm not sure. But Dr. Goodman said 16% of serial killers are black. And then Walters, Deslane, Hickey, and Patrick, 2014, they basically said it's kind of been the thing that 1 in 5 serial killers were black. But now they went on to say that recently it's more like 15%. And then additionally, 17% of serial killers are female. So we're definitely seeing that no, not all serial killers are white males. So especially in the last, however many years we're talking about, 10, 20 years or so. And then there was another study, I think this was also the Walters Hickey. So this was done from 2004 to 2014, and it said that 40% of serial killers were white, 52% black, which is pretty crazy, Hispanic 5%, and then I just put other. I think it was talking about different like Indian subsects of race, and so I just put other. And then we have Hickey, who did a study between 1795 and 1988. And so of his 203 serial killers that he studied, 34 were female and 194 were male. So yeah, definitely a lot of evidence pointing to overall male and white, but recently, it's kind of evening out between white and black. So the next question we're moving on to is, are serial killers born or made? Me personally, I think that question is they're made. Or I guess specifically the question is, what's more likely? So I think they could be born, if there was some sort of physical or mental disability from birth that inhibited them to develop social skills. Therefore, they become isolated and, develop different tendencies just because of their isolation. So the first thing I picked out for this was the trauma control model of Hickey, and this is basically talking about how they're made. So sorry, I'm using my phone, so I have to zoom in. So it's talking about how predispositional factors and facilitators, so basically your parents, contribute to traumatic events, low self-esteem, fantasies, increasing violent fantasies, and then that goes to homicidal behavior, disassociation, and trauma reinforcement. So basically it's a trickle down. So we're going to get more into that as this goes on. So then we're going to go back to a homicide detective's take, Chief Nelson. So we're basically talking about what happens in early childhood that's going to escalate to serial killer. So we have sexual dysfunction, the serial killer was a victim of sexual abuse, raised in an abusive household. So because of this, they probably never received social training. And some of them, serial killers, just from what they're finding, is that have the emotions of an adolescent. And then these things basically continue with them isolating themselves, and they have their own fantasy world, which Chief Nelson said majority of the time that's going to be a sexual fantasy world. And then, they're in their own sexual fantasy world, in their home, isolated, whatever, doing their thing to get their gratification. But eventually it's just not enough. So then they're going to have to keep upping the stakes. And so then they do something risky in public, maybe. And so they're going to live off that high a little bit from that. But eventually the memory of that, or the gratification that they're getting out of that, is going to dissipate, and then they're going to do it again, and it's not going to have the same effect, and then it's going to keep growing until eventually they're kind of looking towards like, like killing people and sexual gratification, stuff like that. And obviously that isn't the only type of killer, but I think kind of what we've been learning is that's the most common, at least. And what I find interesting with that whole discussion is that I find that needing to get more and more, the same as like drug abuse. So I've always heard that let's just use heroin as an example. The first time you use heroin, it's the best thing, and then from there on out, you never get that same experience again. So you're just chasing that experience, and nowadays that just leads to fentanyl, because I guess it's cheap, and then it also gives you that crazy high. But you're always just chasing more and more and more, and you're just caring less and less about everything, and you just need to do whatever you can to continue that. So that's it for my questions, and thank you.